In this video, I'm going to show you how to install 2-inch risers on a Jeep Wrangler. With the vehicle on the ground, open the hood. It's easier to access the top of the shock with the weight of the vehicle on the ground. So once you've lifted the hood and the vehicle's on the ground, this hole in this fender well, that is the top of the shock right there. You can see the nut on the stud, and it's a 9/16 normally, at least this one is. So I'm going to put a socket on there, and then down below, we're going to put a pair of locking pliers on there to stop that stud from spinning. Let me show you something. On a tool like this, I don't know if you're aware of it, but if your locking pliers have that little Allen head on the bottom, no need of squeezing and hurting your hand. You just lock them on and then tighten it up by spinning this. Now my lug nuts on this vehicle are a 21mm socket. You might have a 19 or a 7/8. But remove the tire. So you're going to want to get a pole jack or a floor jack, something that you can support the suspension in the front of the front differential, because we want to put pressure on this to take the pressure off of the sway bar link, so we can move those springs on both sides. Now we're going to take the front link off. I like to take the lowers off because the tops have a stud on them and you could break them easily. T55 Torx bit for this Jeep on this side, and 18mm socket for the nut on this side, and release. You're going to do the same to the other side so that we can have this front differential hang right down. That's the goal here. Pull that bolt right out. And now you can raise the vehicle up until that front coil springs are dangling. Just like that. So now with the suspension free to bounce back and forth, we're going to take both front coil springs out, just like this. Slide it down, remembering that the narrow part goes on the top and the open wide on the bottom. Set it aside. So now we have to take this joust bumper like cushion out of this housing. And the best way to do it, if you can see there's a dimple here, there's one there, pushing and squeezing on this. So I take a screwdriver, because they have been in there for a while, and you just gotta work it back and forth. A pair of channel locks. Okay, little damage but not wasted. Now right here on this cup, it's bolted up inside of this little shaft. And you have to take this off because the plastic 2-inch riser won't go over this lip. So 5/8 socket, I'm gonna get right in there. Wow, look at all that. So now we're going to want to take this rubber bushing off. It's the spring cushion. I just take a flat screwdriver, and you're going to bring it right down this little tower. This tower is welded on, so it should be in good shape. Now you can see the marks where that spring sat. But we're going to get our riser, 2-inch riser. And first I'm going to just spray this. Spray the inside. Now you see the flat spot? That goes inward like this. So we're going to put that on. Don't be afraid to get a rubber mallet or a hammer. Keeping that flat spot in the back. Make sure that flat spot's in the back. It is. Seated. So once that boot is up in there for the spring, we can take the cup and put the cup back. I actually already pre-sprayed the threads, and I got a new bolt because the old bolt was pretty bad, so I recommend changing the bolt if you need to. So I found it to be 10 millimeter by 1.5 thread. I clean the threads out, start it by hand, and now I'm gonna snug that up. That just really holds that cover on so it doesn't have to get torqued or anything. And now we're gonna put our boot back up in with a little, see if we can hammer that up in there. So I'm just gonna wedge that up in there. Oh. If you can get your hands on a new one, you can go that route too. All right, now we're gonna have to compress that spring because we dropped this down 2 inches. So we're gonna compress the spring so we can put it up in. All right, so what I have is a spring compressor tool, and I'm going to compress the spring so that we can install it. And hopefully we get it at the right location so we can get it out. Just go back and forth. All right, let's test it and see if we collapsed it enough. All right, let's get that link out of the way there. See if we can put this up in there. Almost. So I'm going to get a big pry bar. See if I can help pull this down a little bit. And right down. Just like that. So the lower spring actually has a seat where that cutout of that spring sits on this differential. So we definitely want to get it as close as we can. And we're going to undo this back compressor spring so I can get that in. There we go. Now we can take this out of there. See if we can spin this just enough. There we go. Bottom is seated right where it needs to go. Twist that. It really doesn't matter, it's all one level. Now we can release the front one. Okay, let's see if we can get this a little more. Okay. So before we lower it down and tighten everything up on this side, we're going to need to put the spring on the other side by doing the same procedure, compressing it, putting it up in. So when we lower it down on the jack stand, we'll be good to tighten everything up. Now we're going to bring the actual vehicle down on the stand so we can push that suspension back up and line up the sway bar links. And if you can get the shocks in too, that would be perfect. Let's get the bolt and the nut. The washer and the nut go on the inside. The bolt goes through. We have two, one on the other side also. T55 Torx bit goes on the star side. An 18 millimeter socket, and we're going to torque that to 70 foot-pounds. And do the same to the other side. Now with that jack stand there, we can also guide our shock right through that spot. We can put our bushing on first, then our washer. So just like that, slide it over that top of that shock, put the nut on, And I'm just holding it in place because once I get the tires on and I lower it down, that's when I'm going to tighten this up and torque it. Now we can remove the jack from underneath that front differential. Now we can put the tire on, and once the tire is on, we can lower it and tighten up the shock. You want to snug them up in a star crisscross pattern. So now you can see as we lower the car, you'll watch that shock bottom out, and that's why you can't tighten it till it's down on the ground on full suspension load. With a 5/8 socket, now you can tighten your shock. Make sure that that tower is not spinning. I'm going to snug it right up. Mostly you would tighten a shock until you see that rubber bushing just start to collapse and mushroom. You don't ever want it to overpower the actual washer. Sometimes you'll see people tighten them so that the rubber is on the outside of the washer. It's coned over, and that is not the correct way. It's kind of getting bottoming out. And I'm going to go get the torque wrench because the torque is only 17 foot-pounds. Hold on to the top of the shock and snug it to 17 foot-pounds. Now we can put that additional nut on. That's the thinner nut. That's considered a lock nut. Place that right over the top. Same size socket. And that one we're just going to lock it down over. So I put a 5/8 wrench on that bottom nut and the socket on the top, and I just want them to compress together, and now that's locked. So the wheel torque is 83 to 115 foot-pounds, anywhere in between. I'm going to go with 110 because it's an 03 model that I'm working on, and that's original studs, so they're kind of stretched. Make sure you go in the star pattern, double check. So now we're going to move to the rear of the vehicle and continue the installation. Remove the tire. These lug nuts are 19mm socket. Now we can remove the tire. Put your jack stand in place to support the rear differential. 15mm wrench or socket on the head of the bolt, and 18mm socket or wrench on the bottom of the nut on this side. You're going to do both at the same time. You might as well take care of it because it's right here. So I'll just take a hammer and I'm going to tap that lower bolt out. Now that the shocks are disconnected, we can lower the differential from the pole jack. And we're just going to let it hang down as far as it can come. Looks like it kind of ran out there. There we go. So now we have enough play, almost, but we have to compress this anyways. So I'm gonna take advantage of it in the vehicle, and I'm gonna put on my spring compressor tool. That way I know really what angle I can get at when I reinstall it. Now I'm gonna put one on the other side of the spring. Now it's the same procedure as the front. You can see the dimple here. There's one there and one on the other side. There's 3 pushed in dimples on this bushing, and it's pretty much hard at this point. So screwdriver and just work it till you can get that bushing out so we can get to that bolt. 15mm socket. So what you want to do is take that bolt, center bolt right out, and the cushion automatically fell down, which we're going to put back up. So now we're going to install the rear riser with the spring. So the rubber piece that was up on the top here is going back on the top. Then you're going to take your riser, center it. So we have our rubber base, our riser. I had to get a new bolt because of the width, the 2-inch. That's 10 by 1.5 pitch. So it's a 10mm bolt by 1.5. Start it by hand, and then I'm going to take my socket and I'm going to snug that up. And now we're going to put that damper back in. This is kind of difficult. It's just a matter of just hitting it up there. I think I'm going to spray some Penetrant spray on it just to make it a little happier. Enough. So I got my long pry bar because we have to now pull this differential down on this side to get the spring up in there. I still got my clamps on. I'm going to guide it up in there best I can. Like that. Make sure these aren't hitting anywhere. See if I can pull it down enough. Give it a little tap. There we go. Now I'll get my 24mm. I'm going to get my wrench to undo those clamps. This side clamp is hitting. So I'm going to try to undo this one first. Getting to the end. It does take time doing it with a wrench, but it's safety first. So I've got this one almost out. Then I have to do that inner one. But it's seated on the top and the bottom. That's the key part of that. It's seated here and it's seated inside. So now we'll work our way over here. See if we can loosen this one up. Now we got it pretty loose. Take this out of here. There we go. Now the spring is in, and we'll put the shocks in. I'm going to set the pole jack up on each individual suspension at a time. So I'm going to do this side first. I'm going to raise it up so that I can get that shock in the bracket. I'm just basically compressing that shock, the spring. Now with a screwdriver or an awl, I guided the bottom of this down so that I could get the bolt in there. I'll get that with a hammer. Hit that bolt right through, start your nut. That's a 15mm socket or wrench and 18 socket or wrench on that side. We're going to snug it up and then torque it. And the torque spec is 74 foot-pounds for the bottom. 18mm socket, 15mm wrench. And now do the same to the other side. Now we can install our tire. Match it up, put your lug nuts on. Mine are 21mm socket. I've seen some with 19. In a star pattern. Now we're going to lower it and torque it to the factory specs. So before we torque this, I'll tell you the manufacturer's spec is 85 to 115 foot-pounds. I'm going to do 110 because of the age of the vehicle. In a crisscross pattern. And double check. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.